Sorry, I just saw that I'm muted. So good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me well now. And I say thank you for joining us for this very important webinar on the economics burden of tobacco use. And often we do approach tobacco from the public health angle, which is very valid. Tobacco is a public health issue. But more and more, as we engage government on policies, we also know that tobacco control is multi-sectoral. It's tobacco control. It's a lot to do, has a lot to do with economics, and there is also no way you want to speak about tobacco control without looking at the economic burden of tobacco use. Conversely, economic argument always been what the industry will always want to use to justify their continuation in their trade. And that's why I said much earlier that today's webinar is very important to sharpen our skills and our knowledge about the fact that tobacco consumption, tobacco production, the entire tobacco business itself has become an economic burden. Institutions like the World Bank had recognized that years and years ago. And we are so happy today that we have Dr. Adedeji Adeniro, who will be joining our own Chibuke Nwokore to address this particular issue. I know for a fact that CSEA has done some research on the economics of tobacco in Nigeria, and it will be very good to share some of those insights so that we all learn and be able to use it in future engagement. So once again, on behalf of NTCA, I want to thank everybody and our resource persons for today. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kimbode. We appreciate your remarks and for laying the background for this conversation today. So, like Mr. Kimbode had introduced, we have Dr. Adedeji Adeniran from the Center for the Study of the Economics of Africa, and he will be talking to us this morning about the economic burden of tobacco use, particularly in Nigeria. Dr. Adedeji, you have the floor, sir. You have 20 minutes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and thanks everybody for joining us this morning. I think Mr. Oluwafemi has actually set the right tones for this conversation. In the tobacco industry, there is a danger of a single story. And what I mean by the single story is the fact that tobacco industry argument has always been that there is economic benefit that they had to the society. Right? They talks about the jobs, they talks about whether government revenue, and when they actually push this narrative and single story to the public, we really think about, okay, if we really, really push too much on them, what happens to this economic benefit? But a complete story is actually to look at what they call the benefit and also look at the cost. It is actually when we understand the both sides that we actually could really conclusively say what are the value they had. For example, I think it's a common economic thinking that when the cost is more than benefit, the activities needs to actually be reduced. So what we're actually trying to do in this study is actually to complete the story and say, okay, this is the cost. And when we understand the cost of tobacco smoking, that gives us a way to really balance that. Say, if these activities, if the cost is more than the benefits, then there is actually economic rationale for us to actually push for reduced activities such that we can actually eventually control the stance. And that's actually the story I will be sharing this morning. Just one caveat to add before I go into the conversation is the fact that in this the analysis or the study I'm presenting, it's part of what we did in early 2020. So this study, in a way, it's a 3 to 4 years hold, and a lot of dynamics to actually reflect on that. For example, inflation and exchange rate I mean, when we do this study, exchange rate is about 360 to $1, and now we have it tripled. So even when we talk about the costs of these diseases, in the present instances, I think the fact is that it has really, really increased economic-wise. Just as we say, inflation is going is bad. Just like we talk about all of this, cost of actually smoking is actually going up. And in terms of the benefit, we don't actually see that any. I mean, what they could claim in terms of whether tax revenue, all of that has not actually been changing or even decelerated. So it just gives you the kind of picture in terms of what is going on in the industry. So as a way of background, first of all, incidence of smoking globally in terms of burning, it's there. And we all know that smoking remains the leading cause of preventable disease, not just in Nigeria, but even globally. And because of that, a lot of activities or a lot of people have called for initiatives to actually address the problem. In the tobacco research space, this is mostly referred to as empower policies. However, we have weak or absent of evidence of costs really essentially not given a very big I mean, it has centered on the narrative of the industry in terms of the benefit. So it's important for us to understand the cost. But more importantly, it's also important for us to also understand the fact that as a country like Nigeria, we have a very youthful population. The effect of tobacco don't just come in now. And what we are trying to do is actually something that can prevent collapse of our health system, let's say in the next 2 or 3 decades. The graph I'm showing here, it's one of the classical studies by Ray, I mean, this is one of the studies that conveniently link smoking to lung cancer. And what you see is the disparity of about 30 years between between consumption of smoking and the onset of lung cancer. So those kind of gaps, it shows that when people actually started smoking, the effect doesn't really just emerge overnight. And sometimes that really prevents us from really taking, it doesn't come 1 year, it doesn't enter 5 years, sometimes even 10 years. And that's actually really doesn't allow us to actually take action as we should. But I want to actually emphasize this morning that any action we take today, trying to prevent the collapse of the system, whether in 20 years or 30 years time. So there's a kind of duration between smoking and the onset of the cancer. And so it is better to prevent. And whatever we do today can play a big role. And how big a role can this play? Again, I want to actually just show this study from among the British doctors. And it looks at the survival rate to the age of 70 among this population. And the evidence, for example, if you look at the white line on your left side, it's showing you that the propensity of reaching the age of 70 is 80% among non-smokers, and it is about 58% among those that smokes. That gives you about 10 years gap between people that are smoking and people that are not smoking. But even more evident is what you look at on your right side, and it shows that if people actually stop smoking very early enough, for example, when they were still below the age, what happens? And we see the comparison improving very well. So people that actually stop, ex-smoker that stop between the age of 35 and 44, they gain 9 years. So the earlier we actually take action, the earlier we ensure that people, we change the narrative and people stop smoking. That gives a lot of benefits going forward. So the cost I mentioned in terms of 30-year onset and what we have, if we actually take effective action, we can reverse some of that. And how do we reverse it is actually understanding the context very well. So this morning, my presentation is about some of the health economic models that we worked on, and we used that model to really examine the disease burden of smoking, accounting for both the direct and indirect costs, and also the cost effectiveness of tobacco control. So first, I want to actually just give you a little bit of what we did. So what do we mean by the direct cost? It's just when you are sick, all the cost that is actually related to whether out-of-pocket cost by the patient, whatever, or whoever bear the costs in terms of treating the patient, those are the direct costs, and it includes caregiver costs, drug prescription, how you get to the hospital, medical supplies, diagnostics and treatment, all of that are actually the direct cost in terms of what actually it costs to treat the patient. But the cost of economic cost of tobacco is not just the direct cost. It also has to do with the indirect cost. For example, when someone is actually sick, that would account for reduced productivity, work absenteeism. There could be issue of stroke, which leads to premature disabilities, and also deaths that also really accounts for workforce losses and labor productivity. But more importantly, we also have the opportunity cost because of engaging caregivers. Because if the person is not sick, the cost of people treating with them will not actually emerge. So all of that are things we need to account for. And in this study, what we did was to pick about 3 health institutions in Nigeria. So we look at 3 locations: Enugu State for Southeast, then for the Southwest we pick University of Ibadan, University College Ibadan, and also in Abuja we survey both the National Hospital and Gwagwalada hospitals. And in this case, we actually consulted with the oncologists. These are people that treat cancers, and also the and we look at the literature. We look at diseases that has been widely attributed to smoking. And through KIs and discussion with these doctors, they were able to give us all what the costs that it would take on average to treat the typical case of those illnesses in their health facilities. So that's actually how we were able to account for the direct cost. In terms of the indirect cost, we look at the larger data sets, for example, the DHS 2018, and we bring up this data. We look at how, for example, the wage, the age group, and all of that. That gives us a proxy to actually estimate the possible wage loss at each age group, but also the number of other factors, economic and demographic factors, and how this affects the indirect cost in terms of our projections going forward. So because, based on that, we did this analysis, and 3 types of data that I've mentioned: the epidemiological data, which we took from the hospitals, also economic data sets were used in terms of some, for example, consumption, taxes, price elasticity, all of that actually important variables to actually do our estimation, but also the demographic trends, so that we could actually see what happened among men, what happened among women, what happened at each of the age group here within the population. So I want to go into showing you some of the results that comes out of the study. So first is the direct cost. Like I said, we did this in 3 locations: Ibadan, Enugu, and Abuja. And these are some of the diseases that has been attributed to tobacco smoking. Let me also say that these are not all the ones that we alluded to in the literature. And also the ones that when we go to these hospital records, they have experience of treating within the Nigerian system. It's also important to highlight the fact that most times when people actually are sick, people don't go to the hospitals directly. And so most even don't consult doctors, and those are in most ways not even captured in terms of the prevalence rate. But what the picture here is showing is this: in all the 3 locations, it's actually quite expensive to treat tobacco in terms of the direct cost. It runs into millions in most cases. Even the lowest one, tuberculosis, also runs into thousands, or even the pneumonia. Those cost effectively. And we can see how that costs vary between active and post-active period. What we mean by active period is during the period whether the person is hospitalized or under intense hospital care. And the post-active period is when the hospital system says, okay, you're fine, you can be going, and you can now be managing yourself. So those are actually both costs that we accounted for. And to show you how big this cost is, for example, that is about, if you look at the oral cancer, the first one, that's about 289% of our per capita income. I mean, just to give you an analysis, that means it's more than twice. Nigerian per capita income. And in terms of when you compare it even to, say, for example, poverty line, the number of people that live in poverty, that is about 70 times Nigerian poverty line. It means that tobacco diseases represent a catastrophic health spending, which means for families that actually experience such, they might enter into, I mean, it pushes them into poverty, it destabilizes the family and family income. So in a way, it's something, if it is preventable, it's something that we need to actually really emphasize the efforts there. But more important is the fact that when we talk about this direct cost, the biggest cost of tobacco lies in the indirect cost in terms of productivity loss, the premature death, and also some of the opportunity cost. And I want to actually then show you how we estimate the indirect cost. And when we then combine this direct and indirect costs, we could see that in all analysis, the whatever benefits the tobacco industry might be alluding to, the cost is quite huge. And that gives us a cost benefit analysis that says that I will be talking about. So in terms of mortality and morbidity from smoking, again, we look at these illnesses attributed to the disease. And first, we show you the total death, and then we show you the number that is actually attributed to smoking. And I think the picture to show you here is the fact that in terms of the major health risks actually comes from, for example, cardiovascular diseases and COPD. Those are actually major kind of diseases, and where a lot of people tends to die in Nigeria, and that includes heart disease and other factors. In all, estimate shows that about more than 28%, or in terms of illnesses, we have more than 127 cases that's in our study are attributable to the diseases, and we can then project that to the whole population. So, for example, if we project that and put estimates in that range, we are talking about each of these diseases. You could see in millions how much it actually costs the whole population to actually conveniently. I mean, in terms of putting numbers on both the direct and indirect costs of these illnesses. For example, the cardiovascular diseases, that is around about 37 billion naira. COPD, that's also about 370 billion naira. But when you add everything together, we are talking about 587 billion naira. And if you convert that, I mean, in terms of the dollar terms, that's about $1.9 billion. Again, like I said, dollar and all the other factors has actually changed, and that gives you a kind of begin to think about also that this disease or these numbers, all of them might have actually even tripled. And so increasingly, we are actually, the cost is there. And the need for action then, it's quite important. I mean, the last part is just to highlight the disability the year loss due to disability as health economists used to estimate. And again, this is higher among men and women. But more importantly is the fact that if we take action, there is a way we can actually prevent it. Part of the study which I want to highlight in this conclusion is the fact that when we did this model and we look at the potential of actually increasing tobacco taxes by more than 50% of the retail price. Of course, the WHO recommendation is 75%, but even if we will go as far as 50%, in 10 years, we can actually save about 23,000 lives. And if you look at that numbers, annually, about 28,000, the first graph I showed you, about 28,000 people die per annum due to smoking, smoking attributable diseases in Nigeria. If in 10 years, we can save 10% of that just through taxation. But even if we combine that with other empower policies like smoking, other prevention, smoke-free areas, education, enlightenment, and also enforcement illicit trade in tobacco, and also cross-border kind of transaction that takes place. If we actually combine all these policies, we can also even go further and save more lives. And that's actually the basis of my presentation this morning, that irrespective of what tobacco industry talks about, I think my colleagues will be talking about interference. They tend to actually champion the benefit in terms of tax revenue, in terms of jobs, all of this. If you put the number, it's not up to 100 billion in terms of all of those contributions. But the society continues to pay significantly, about more than 500 billion. And so for that, for that reason, we are losing. And if someone is actually losing from activities, I think the reasonable thing is to reduce such level of can reduce the loss. And that's actually the basis for the advocacy around tobacco control. And that this is actually not just going to help us today, it's going to help our health system from collapse, and it's going to save costs in terms of for individual and also for government that tends to bear the full brunt of disease treatment. So thank you so much again. I'm happy to have all of you on this morning. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adeniran, for that very, very insightful presentation. The costs that tobacco use has, the economic burden from poverty, the poverty that it causes, the resources that are spent on hospital bills, the healthcare systems that are overstretched. Thank you so much. I was taking notes when you were speaking, and there's something that stood out to me when you were talking about action. I will read what I wrote down. You said that the earlier we take action, the earlier people who smoke or use tobacco products can stop and reverse the years of damage. Thank you, Dr. Adeniran. If you have questions for Dr. Adeniran, please use the chat box. We'll not take them now, but we'll take the questions at the end of the second presentation. All right, so the next speaker is Mr. Chibuike Nwokorie of the Nigeria Tobacco Control Alliance, and he will be talking to us about tobacco industry interference in Nigeria. Some of the solutions that Dr. Adeniran proposed, why haven't those solutions been implemented? What are the issues? What is militating against the advancement of tobacco control to save the lives of Nigerians? So we'll be hearing from Mr. Chibuike Nwokorie. Mr. Chibuike, you have the floor, sir.
All right. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Please go on.
Okay. Okay, can you see my screen? Confirm if you can see it.
Yes, we can see.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Paul. Thank you, Dr. Deji, for laying that background. Briefly, we are going to look at, a lot of efforts have been made by government to control tobacco in Nigeria, but the industry, as we know, they are not sleeping. They will do everything possible to frustrate the efforts to control tobacco effectively in the country, in as much as we know that, yes, a lot of efforts have been made, but more needs to be done. And the industry is doing everything possible to make sure that they frustrate all these efforts. And briefly, we are going to look at some of these ways the industry is interfering. And I must say, we got some of all these things, experiences from people like Mr. Akimbode, things they've seen in these fights in controlling tobacco. So we put some of them together for us to know them. And even as advocates in our little corners, some of all these things will come to us. Okay, first we look at Article 5.3 of the WHO Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which we normally call WHO FCTC. The purpose of this FCTC is to ensure that efforts to protect and control from commercial and other vested interests of the tobacco industry are comprehensively and effective. So this article in a nutshell is trying to protect the policies of governments from the interference of the industry. That is why this article is so important to us, because the industry, they are so, will I say, forceful. They use every means to make sure that tobacco is not effective. So that's why this Article 5.3 was put in this WHO FCTC. Okay, what is tobacco industry interference? You can say any commercial or vested interest of the tobacco industry that subtly undermines development, implementation, and enforcement of public policies, measures, and laws for tobacco control. It can also mean any tactics employed by tobacco industry, in a nutshell, any tactics, anything the industry does to make sure that tobacco is not effectively controlled for the benefit of public health at any time. It comes in various times, at any point they can come. So whatever they do to make sure either to derail, delay, distort tobacco control, all those things are tobacco control, are tobacco industry interference. So we're going to look at some of the forms that these things, they take place. These are some of the forms. Maneuvering to hijack the political and legislative process. I have to read this. In a presentation to the Philip Morris Board of Directors in 1995, a senior vice president of worldwide regulatory affairs of the company, he said, our goal is to help shape regulatory environments that enable businesses to achieve their objectives, fighting aggressively to make sure with available resources against any attempts from any quarter, So what they did, this is their own document, and that they will fight aggressively with any available resources to make sure that any policy, legislation, whatever government has, they will make sure that they get involved and derail that move. And this can be seen when Nigeria was trying to pass the Nigerian Tobacco Control Act of 2015. When we went to the National Assembly that time, you will see everywhere there is this young man. Anytime I speak about this, the picture of that young man always comes to mind, because he is, will I say, he was seconded or posted to the National Assembly. He was virtually living and working in the National Assembly. Any office you go to, he's always there, trying to make sure that the act, then being a bill, is derailed, to water it down, and which they achieved a bit in doing. But thank God for the doggedness of people like Mr. Akimbode, CTFK led by Mrs. Hilda then, and other people that made sure that the industry did not do the great harm that they would have loved to do. And we can see that the National Tobacco Control Act of 2015 is the first law in Nigeria that had a clause that after passing it, that the regulation to enforce that law must come back to the National Assembly. And that took us another 4 years before the regulation was approved. And that was the handwork of the industry. They would do everything possible to make sure that there is no strong act or regulation to regulate their activities. And even in the regulation, I know that even the graphic health one, which I know that most of you have helped us to do one work or the other to get information in markets, even the graphic health one, what the Ministry of Health proposed was around 80%. But the industry with their push and everything was reduced to 50. So these are some of the things the industry will do to make sure that they interfere and make sure that the tobacco control is not effectively done. Exaggerating the economic importance of the industry. This is just to address the point Dr. Deji just made. The industry will tell you that they have made government to have billions of dollars. They will quote figures that you ask yourself, if these figures are like this, that means everywhere in Nigeria will be tarred in gold. They won't tell you how much people, like Dr. Deji just brought out now, how much government is spending on health. So they will exaggerate what they are doing, that we are paying tax. They will claim that they have a lot of people that they've employed. And look, most of the people they claim they've employed are those people selling every other thing. That person in your neighborhood selling a lot of sweets, chewing gum, and other things, maybe has 2 or 3 packets of cigarettes. So they will claim that that is the person that they're creating jobs, so that if you do regulation, maybe people will lose their jobs. But what we've been able to find out is that the tobacco industry in Nigeria put together, I don't think they have up to 1,000 direct employees. So, and if I will ask most of us that are here now, how many people in your community, not in your family, in your community can you say that they are really working in tobacco industry? I don't know if it will be up to 1 or 2, but they will tell you that they have workers all over. So these are some of the things they will do to make sure that interfere. By the time they give government some of all this false information, the main intention is to derail and confuse the government and the general public, to say that they're creating jobs. Then they know how to manipulate public opinion to show that they are good and responsible industry. They do what we call CSR. There was a time I was in Aba. I was going across, people that are here from Aba axis, they will know Enyimba filling station. I was crossing over to the other side as if you're going to Umode. I saw a borehole. That borehole was dug by BAT, and you will see their bold signposts. So these are some of the things they will do to show that, and we call those things CSR. This is one of the things, some of the things they will do to show that, yes, we are a responsible organization. And even when you talk, like that borehole I mentioned, I said about, the people within that community, when you're talking about tobacco control, they will be the first to fight you, to ask you that how. These people that give us water, why are you saying that they should stop their business? No, this is some of the things they do to make sure that they project themselves as a responsible company or industry, so that people will really buy into them and support them. But what the government and advocates are saying is that tobacco industry should pay the needed taxation, allow the government to do what it needs to do. You don't need to invest in tax, doing that sort of things, and now telling us that you are doing CSR and you are doing this in one community or the other. And since the main aim is to make sure that you are projecting, they are projecting themselves in a good light. So these are some of the things the industry will do to make sure. They even go as far as sponsoring some parties. Here in Abuja, we saw one last month that they did somewhere. Some of us in Abuja knows where Lokogoma is. They did a party, You know, they would throw some parties, people will come, people will smoke and all those of things. And most of you now, if we tell you to share your experience, I know that most of us have some experiences, even when we were in schools, they do a lot of things in the form of CSR, throw parties and all the rest of them to make sure that they interfere with the proper control of tobacco in this country. Fabricating supports through front groups. The industry has the attitude of having a fake support. When we are going to National Assembly then to pass the Act of 2015 and even the regulation, there were these groups, about 2 or 3 groups. Some will come up and tell you that they are Smokers' Rights Association of Nigeria. Some will say Human Rights Defenders Association of Nigeria. We even saw some people that were wearing Ashwebi. They said that Tobacco Farmers Association of Nigeria. These are some of their front groups that they always come to talk that they have their rights, citizens' rights, smokers' rights. You know, these are some of the groups the industry will, you know, they will, let's say, they will manufacture them. You know, they will create them, they will raise them, equip them. You know, you see somebody that will come, ask the person, he said he's a member of Tobacco Farmers Association, ask him how many hectares. He will tell you he doesn't have a tobacco farm. But the industry has been able to mobilize them, brought them, gave them some ashwebi with drums. So when most of us in the tobacco control, we are one corner saying that then we are talking to people like then President Goodluck, and then 2019, we're talking to people like Senior President then, Dr. Bukola Saraki, give us this. Then they were on their own corner shouting, we have our rights, we will die. If you stifle tobacco industry, we will die. These are means of livelihood. So these are some of the things the industry have used over the years, you know, to use all these front groups to speak in order to derail the enforcement and trying to control tobacco. Discrediting proven sciences. Don't be surprised that even what Dr. Dedeji presented now, CC is a well-known research organization globally. The industry will come and say, no, forget about that findings. You know, it's not a good finding. Look at, we have our own. So one of their things is to be able to bring out some other alternative research reports, discrediting proven sciences. You know, we know at a time when one of our partners, Kappa, was writing and fighting against one of the industries when they are trying to be in partnership with the University of Nigeria and SOCA. These are some of the things they do. I know that we have even some researchers amongst us here. They may come to you, you know, that kind of research that they know the result they want to arrive at. They will tell you the results, you know, everything. And no matter how you do your research, the result will be what they want you to push out. So they are good at doing that so that they will keep on using some of all these manipulated research works to influence government policies and government laws in terms of controlling tobacco effectively. Intimidating governments with litigation or the threat of litigation. Globally, the industry have gone ahead to intimidate governments that will sue. Some countries, they've really sued. But one thing that we've seen is in many countries, they've always lost the cases because they don't have anything to sue. There was a time we were at SON standards for cigarettes. The industry, when government was trying to put some things in place, the industry worked out that they will sue governments. But thank God for the chairman of that committee that day, that was the head of FCCPC. He stood his ground and made them to understand that this is government. You don't dictate to government how you want to do your business. They came back and they apologized. You know, so those are some of the things that they will say that we are going to sue. They will be dead with litigation. And you know, at times, government and other people, especially in our own client, we are always, will I say, afraid of when somebody say, I'll take you to courts. You know, so they will use some of all those things to distract governments. They sued countries like Kenya, Uganda, you know, but along the line, all these governments, all these countries won the case. So we may get to that level, that point in Nigeria, when they will sue the government. But remember, the main end of all these things is to interfere in tobacco control in this country. Okay, one of the other things they do is poaching or recruiting of some tobacco control advocates and staff. Yes, the industry is known by poaching some people that are vocal in tobacco control, even some people that have worked in government in tobacco control circle. We have many of them. We have somebody that was working in one of the organizations in Abuja here that was the desk officer of tobacco control in that organization. But when she retired, the next thing we heard about her was she was working with BAT. At early stage of trying to pass this law, I won't mention the name, but Mr. Bode is here. He knows him well. The person was a consultant to CTFK, Campaign for Tobacco Free Kids, in National Assembly. At the time, I asked about him. Say, where is this? The man was a top government official. Where is he? And I was told that, no, he's now working with BAT. So he was consultant for tobacco control, public health people. Within a short while, the industry offered him a reasonable amount. And he, like most of us that watched this man, Saka, that said, I don't port to, the man immediately ported to the industry side. And these are things we'll see every time. And if I say most of us should give our own experiences, many of us has been approached, to join the industry. And the thing is, they make you offer that even your parents or your partners, when they hear that you reject such an offer, some of them may say, as we normally say in our local palace, the villagers, my village people are doing this. Because when they hear the offer, they will offer you. And most of the things they do is to make sure they give themselves a good face. Just imagine, in tobacco control in Nigeria, I don't think if you go online and Google tobacco control, one of the first names that will appear is somebody like Mr. Akimbode Oluwafemi. Just imagine that you hear tomorrow that such a name is now working with industry. It will boost the industry morale, and it will dampen even the morale of most of us, the younger ones looking up to him. So the industry, they are good at doing that, poaching and recruiting people that have really worked in tobacco control. That is their stock interest. So don't be surprised by the time you are corner, you are so vocal about tobacco control, public health issues, they may come to you. Last week, we were at Port Harcourt. One of the government people that were there, he just showed us the letter sent to him by the industry with a good offer. This is what I'm saying was just last week. I'm not saying what happened last year. This last week, So he showed the letter until we advised him that this is. So when we were making a decision about industry interference, the man was just smiling that exactly what happened to him, even in the process of this meeting. Even this meeting we are having now, they are following everything up because it's not a hidden meeting. It's on Facebook and everywhere. So they may get to you to try to give you an offer. But remember, the health of Nigerians is so important. You may think about the money you're going to make today, but think about what happens even to your children, your brothers, and others around you. Okay, some things to keep in mind about tobacco industry interference. It is not always obvious. It does not come like this is tobacco industry coming to interfere. It's not just obvious. It comes a lot of times in a subtle way. It comes so harmlessly. It's just no, why? They must say their own thing. They must make their own statement. It comes in a subtle way. And somebody will say, when you are formulating policies, why don't you allow them to be there? You're talking about them. You can't shave a man's head in his absence. All those words will come. It is not always in the area of tobacco control. They don't always come in the area of tobacco control. They may come from area of trade. I remember also in 2015, where we were trying to pass the law, the then governor, the former governor, past governor of Delta State, who was then senator and committee on health, when we were in public hearing, somebody from trade and investment came, and this person was seriously speaking the language of the industry. When you listen to his presentation, you will know that this presentation was coming directly from the industry. He was saying this, putting thread that are we trying to kill industries? Are we doing this? So he was not talking about really tobacco control. He was talking about thread, until Dr. Kowa now asked him a question, if he's aware that his minister was part of those that approved this as fake. Is he trying now to oppose his minister in public? That was when the man now remembered where he was coming from, and he did not speak again until we left that public hearing. So they may come in many ways. They won't come directly on tobacco control. They may not even come from area of health. They will come from area of making money. And that is why we looked at this webinar, to bring the economic perspective. Yes, we've said a lot, we've said much about health, but that's why we decided to, okay, can we look at the economic angle of this tobacco control we're talking about? Because their products are lethal, the tobacco industry should not be granted incentives to establish or run their businesses. In this country, most times the industry receives some incentives like export expansion grants. They receive a lot of things, tax holiday. Some of all these things, they receive them to make sure that they're still milking and killing our people. I remember last month, people from Ministry of Finance told us that we should start our advocacy that when government is trying to give tax holidays to industries, that the tobacco industry should not benefit from that. And that is what we are saying, because them benefiting in that is supporting them to keep on producing products that are inimical to the health and economy of Nigeria. One thing we should ask ourselves here is, many countries that are producing things that are needed, that really need to survive in Nigeria, they are leaving the country. Why is the industry not leaving? Rather, they are trying to open more factories in Nigeria. That is a good question that we should ask. This economic situation that other companies are facing, that is making them to say, we want to leave. Why is the industry not leaving? Because they're enjoying a lot of benefits in Nigeria, which are not enjoying from their mother countries where they're coming from. But in Nigeria, they enjoy a lot, they interfere a lot, they do as they want. There's a fundamental, please, I would like us to take note of this last point on this. There is a fundamental and irreconcilable conflict between tobacco industry's interests and public health policy interests. They are like two parallel lines. Their own interest is to make profits. Their own interest is gain. But the profits of the public health and all Nigerians should be the health of Nigerians. That should be our own interest. And the health of Nigerians should be treated above any other consideration. Okay, so this is just tobacco industry market share in Nigeria. In 2019, I got this from Tobacco Control Index that CAPA published last month or so. So documented open interference of tobacco industry in Nigeria. The Lagos state government is having a partnership with BATN Foundation, which is against the law and regulation. I know that our partners, CAPA, are reading to them, still following up with them, because they've been doing this. Oyo State government is in partnership with them. As we can see, these are some of the pictures. Some of us that are still core members, and just finished service. These are some of the partnership they said are having with NYSC. Some of all these things is just to make sure that I interfere, because when they do some of all these things, government will not really have the boldness to be able to control them the way it should be. These are some of the pictures that we picked for you. You can see some publications. You can see some of the publications. You can see some of the publications, the activities with government people, So these are some of the front groups of the tobacco industry. One of them is Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN. MAN will always talk from the angle of we are protecting all industries, but a lot of times the industries used to speak through them. Nigerian Employers Consultative Association, Nigerian Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines, and Agriculture. These are some of their front groups, like even in NATOC, the committee that controls tobacco in Nigeria. MAN is a member. And anytime you go to that meeting, that committee meeting, you will hear that what MAN will be talking is against the public health in defense of the industry. So these are some of the few links that if you want to know more about this, you can reach out to us. You can go through all these links. You can go to CAPA Africa/Tobacco Industry Index. You can go to ATCA. You can see a lot of tobacco
Thank you
industry
so much, Mr.
interference.
Chibike.
And at this point, I say thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Chibike Nwokori, for that very detailed presentation on tobacco industry interference in Nigeria. We see how the tobacco industry continues to try to undermine tobacco control efforts. Our time is fast spent, so we'll go a little more quickly. So if you have questions, I noted some questions had come in while Mr. Chibike was presenting. So we have a question from, was this a question? From Michael Nwokori. He says, good day team. I'm working on tobacco control in my PhD. And my interest was aroused after participating in one of the webinars such as this one. And that he would love to have documents. Mr. Michael, we will be sharing the presentations from this webinar. We'll share the slides with you. And that also goes to Mr. Robert. I saw your remark about getting this presentation. We'll share the slides with everyone who has attended this webinar. I hope that answers that. All right, so Kingsley says, as a layman, how can I stop tobacco from spreading? All right, Mr. Chibike, I would love you to take on this question very quickly. If you have something to add, please share with us via the chat box. Mr. Chibike, sir.
Okay, thank you. He asked how he can stop tobacco from spreading. Okay, like having the knowledge and let the people around you know about harms of consumption is one of the ways. And trying to enforce your rights, like we have a lot of things in our laws that talks about no smoking in public places. Some of the things to tell people around me that this is against my rights. But what we see today is people try to smoke anywhere they can. So these are some of the small things you can do in your corner. Let people associate by telling them about the harms of tobacco. So, but if you need more institutions, you can reach us. We can talk more on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chibike. So we are grateful to have Dr. Malau. He is the head of the Tobacco Control Unit within the Federal Ministry of Health. He's on this webinar. It's not to put you on the spot, but I would love you to maybe give us 1 or 2 words of encouragement, sir.
Yeah, good morning all. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, sir. Good morning.
Fine, thank you. First, I want to register my sincere appreciation on behalf of my colleagues here in the Federal Ministry of Health for this great effort that you have put in place to ensure that this webinar, very important for us. I want to thank the 2 presenters, Dr. Adedeji of CC and Chibike of NTCA for doing a very great work. And to our able moderator, Paul Ashibel, honestly, I'm very delighted with this good work. And I want to add that work has just begun. Because given the space we are in now, the industry will want to capitalize on any slight opportunity that is given to them to perpetuate their businesses. And for the statistics that Dr. Adedeji read out, it's a very good statistic. We will look at it at a very close range so that we can't meaningfully engage the top decision makers in the country for us to move ahead. Because as you can look at it, we need to also begin to advance conversation towards funding for health, using statistics to advocate for funding. Meaningful interface. So I would request Dr. Adedeji to look at the section that we will advance advocacy towards it, because we really need to work store funding using this data, because we have seen the morbidity pattern, we have seen the mortality and the cost associated with these areas as regards tobacco consumption and exposure to tobacco smoke. Please, Dr. Adedeji, let's advance discussion beyond this so that we can see what we can come out of it to advocate for more funding to address tobacco issues. Thank you so much, and I appreciate all the participants in the floor. God bless you all.
Thank you so much, Dr. Malau. That's what we're talking about. Commitment for action. That is commitment to take action on what we've talked about today here. Morbidity is really high, and it's something that very concerted efforts must be made to drive down that number. All right, so let me see if we have any other question here. All right, so Michael has another question. He's asking if how can he start a tobacco control club or group in the institution where he teaches at one of the federal universities in the Southeast. All right, I will allow Mr. Chibike to quickly respond to that.
Sorry, Mr. Paul, he asks, what was it?
Okay, he says, I teach in one of the federal universities in the Southeast.
Sir?
Can you hear me, sir?
I can hear you, sir.
Michael said, I teach in one of the federal universities in the Southeast. How do we start a tobacco control group or club in the institution?
Okay. That's a good one, Mr. Michael. I'll reach out to us. We know we have, like you mentioned, of Abuja tobacco-free clubs. We can take it offline, no, because we are looking at our time, but it's something you can start it even with one or two of your students. But as I said, we have a good model at the University of Abuja, and it's a thriving, it's one of our youth partners. So we can also link you up with them, with their presidents, so that there will be like this understanding on how far they've gone and where they're coming from. And I think that will go a long way to help you, because it's a good one that would like even some schools to have the same thing that we have in the University of Abuja. It will help us to go deeper, to catch our younger ones, which marks a mass of the higher institutions. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I want to believe that we've attended to all the questions that have been presented, shared with us here. We will be sharing the slides, like we said. If you haven't filled the attendance form, just wait. We will share. Okay, so question just popped up. Let's look at this quickly before we go. Okay, so Bomo says, I have seen some reports that the tobacco plant is used to keep away reptiles like snakes from homes. It is used for hair products. I think we have dealt with this question here before, but we have a veteran here on this webinar, Mr. Akimbode Oluwafemi, So if you could quickly respond to this question, sir.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now, sir.
Which of the question direct to me?
Okay, so this person says, I have seen some reports that the tobacco plant is used to keep away reptiles like snakes from homes, and also helps in making hair products.
Okay.
Are all this propaganda from the industry as well?
So two quick things. If they use tobacco to keep away snakes and mosquito, like we used to do in our cocoa farm, that is indicative for there is something toxic about it. If animals are running away from tobacco, if cows don't eat tobacco, that's indicative of the fact that I think human senses should also run away from them. Now, in terms of tobacco and the pharmaceutical industry, I will just vaccine. Tobacco companies and Philimoris vaccine. Tobacco companies were the first to tell the world that, okay, they found vaccine, and there is the syndicated lies about the fact that smoking can help to reduce your getting contracted with COVID. At the end of the day, several years down the line, we couldn't see any vaccine from them. So there are so many propaganda about the, the linkages, if there is any, as it were, between tobacco and, creative pharmaceutical industry. However, if science can find another use for tobacco apart from smoking, which is injurious, I think that might also be something that could be looked into the future. But majority of some of these are actually being propelled by the tobacco industry. A lot of Nigerians fell for the trap that when you go to Europe, it's cold, and then you use cigarettes to scare away. I mean, to get with the code over there. All are fallacies. I remember in my secondary school day, there are some of my seniors that started smoking because they couldn't go to toilet because until they smoke, and they will tell you that smoking makes them to, go to toilet easily. So many of them can be an artist, can be a musician, as it were today in Nigeria, without smoking. All these were carefully engineered, created, and sold to the public, and we have to undo them.
Thank you so much. Bomo, I hope that answers your question. I don't know how perfect that answers the question perfectly well for me. I hope it answers your question. All right. So we've come to the end of this very, very insightful webinar session. The last of our webinar series for the year. We always host these webinars to keep you abreast with what's going on, and also to strengthen your capacity and your knowledge so that you'll be able to identify, for instance, the tobacco industry interference. You also know how tobacco impacts your pocket, your personal economy, directly and indirectly, at home and all. I hope that we took some very vital lessons from here. Share the slides with you so that you can continue to study them and improve on your tobacco control efforts. Thank you so much, and have a beautiful weekend. All right, so Mr. Chibike Nwokori, I think he has a thing to add to this.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Paul, and thank you everyone for coming. Our able chair, thank you, sir, for your leadership and guidance, Mr. Akimbode Oluwafemi. We are just learning from you, sir. Dr. Dedeji, thank you, sir. The partnership between NTCA and CC, we believe it will be more robust. Dr. Malau, we appreciate you, sir. Anything you need to know much about government tobacco control, go to TCU. Dr. Malau is ever ready to give you the answer. To everybody that is here, we appreciate you. As Mr. Paul has said, this is the last for the year, but we believe that in the coming years, we are going to have more of the series just to equip us to understand. Then please also to say, please, if you want to be a member of the Alliance, just go online. If you've not, I know that many of us here are already our members, you can go online and you will join. We'll be able to share most of our information with you, tobacco control in Nigeria, and other opportunities that may come. Above all, thank you and enjoy the festive period. Please, tobacco kills. Don't allow others to suffocate you with smoke. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone. See you next year.